"What's your rank, old man?" the young lieutenant shouted, laughing in front of the crew. The old pilot didn't flinch. He just stared at a single jet, calm and unshaken, while the lieutenant mocked him, ready to have him removed. No one knew why he was there, or why that faded jacket mattered. But what happened next, the moment the base went completely silent at his name, would shock everyone and change how they saw heroes forever. Before we dive in, tell us in comments where in the world you are watching from. Afternoon heat rolled across the flight line as crews checked their jets and pilots waited for the next briefing. In the middle of that tight, disciplined space, an old man appeared at the edge of the concrete. He wasn't wandering without purpose. He was moving with slow, steady steps toward a specific aircraft, a model often shown during tours. His jacket looked decades old, the kind only someone who'd lived around planes would keep, and he paused in front of the jet like he was seeing something nobody else could. A young lieutenant noticed him and saw nothing but a stranger out of place. Trying to impress the people around him, he walked over with a grin and said, "What's your rank, old man?" Loud enough for the crew to hear. The tone landed wrong, but no one spoke up. The old man didn't answer, didn't look at the lieutenant. He kept his eyes on the aircraft, calm in a way that didn't match the situation. That confidence bothered the lieutenant, so he waved to security and told them to remove the man if he couldn't show ID. Security moved closer, waiting for the old man to respond, and he finally reached into his jacket. His hands shook from age as he pulled out a visitor badge along with an old base access card that looked older than most of the jets behind him. The lieutenant barely glanced at it before laughing and calling it useless, already convinced the man was wasting everyone's time. But a nearby crew chief stepped closer, noticing a small patch on the faded sleeve of the old jacket. The emblem wasn't a standard unit design. It showed a call sign and a date stitched under it, worn down by decades. The crew chief had seen that same emblem framed in the squadron ready room beside the story of a mission every pilot heard during training. The lieutenant didn't recognize it and kept belittling the man, unaware of what he was brushing off. The old man kept his eyes on the jet, as if it held a memory he had never set down. For a moment, another scene flashed through his mind. A dark sky, a damaged bomber losing altitude, his own fighter struggling for fuel, and a quiet voice in his radio saying, "If one of us makes it home, that's enough." The memory slipped away, but the weight of it stayed with him. In the present, he asked softly if this was the same runway from that night. The lieutenant, annoyed, stepped forward and reached to shove him aside without saying anything. Ramirez had been tightening a panel on the nearest jet when he noticed the tension building around the old man. At first he thought it was just another lieutenant trying too hard to look in charge, but the longer he watched, the heavier the moment felt. His grandfather had spent a lifetime as a crew chief, and used to tell him, "If someone shows up in an old flight jacket, treat them with respect. People don't hold on to those unless they earned them." That memory hit him now, as his eyes drifted to the faded patch on the old man's sleeve. He'd seen that emblem before, not on a uniform, but in a heritage briefing, the kind everyone half listened to. A call sign, a date, a mission nobody talked about without lowering their voice. Suddenly he wasn't just watching an awkward scene, he was watching a mistake unfold. He knew he couldn't step in directly. He was just an airman first class, and the lieutenant outranked him by miles. But doing nothing felt wrong. Ramirez slipped behind the jet, heart pounding, and took out his phone. There was a number they were told to use only for emergencies, something most airmen joked they'd never touch, but he dialed it anyway. When someone from the operations group commander's office answered, he stumbled through his words, explaining that a lieutenant was giving a hard time to an elderly civilian whose visitor badge showed a name he read out loud. The voice on the other end repeated the name slowly. A long silence followed, heavy enough to make Ramirez's skin prickle. Then came sharp, urgent questions. Where exactly? Which squadron? Which jet? Before he could ask what was happening, the voice ordered him not to interfere and to stay right where he was because they were already on their way. In the wing headquarters, a meeting with visiting brass was underway when a staff officer stepped in, holding a note he looked almost afraid to read. He handed it to the wing commander, who scanned the message once and then again, slower. An elderly man on the flight line. A visitor badge with a name every airman learned during training, a name most believed belonged to the last living pilot from a mission spoken of with equal parts pride and disbelief. The commander didn't say a word at first. He just looked up at the framed photo on his wall, the one showing a burning tanker limping across a black sky during Operation Night Vortex, the mission where a young captain had flown a failing jet into danger to pull that tanker away from a city. And from this base, the name under that citation matched the one on the visitor badge. Chairs scraped as he stood. The meeting ended with a simple order. "We're done here." He told the command chief to get a vehicle and then called the squadron, telling them to gather outside their hangar immediately. As they hurried through the building and out to the curb, he directed the PA to quietly spread the word to key units that anyone who could step outside should do so. No formation, no ceremony, just presence. Out on the flight line, the lieutenant tightened his hand around the old man's arm and warned he would have him removed for evaluation if he didn't cooperate. The old man didn't fight back. He simply said he wanted to stand near the runway one more time before his eyes gave out. The lieutenant was still gripping the old man's arm, fed up with his calm answers, when the first ripple of attention moved across the ramp. Airmen looked up from their tasks as a command vehicle sped out of the taxiway, its engine roaring louder than the jets idling nearby. Ramirez, who'd been told to stay put, felt his stomach twist. He already knew who was coming because he was the one who made the call. The vehicle skidded to a stop beside the jet, and before anyone fully understood why, the wing commander stepped out with the group commander and command chief right behind him. Every conversation on the line faded. A few pilots climbing down their ladders froze halfway. Even the lieutenant released his hold, realizing something far bigger than a routine escort was happening. He stood at attention and rushed into a practiced explanation about safeguarding restricted space, insisting he was preventing a breach just like the regulations demanded. But the commanders didn't turn toward him. They walked straight past, their eyes locked on the old man who had quietly asked only to stand near this runway one more time before his vision failed. The wing commander stopped in front of him, exhaled once, and raised a crisp salute sharp enough to cut through the growing silence. "Sir, welcome back." The words struck the entire ramp like a dropped weight. He spoke the old man's name and call sign, describing how he guided a burning tanker away from these very lights decades ago. Tools lowered, engines shut down, and airmen from every corner of the base turned to face him, lifting their hands in a united, silent salute. When the silence finally eased, the wing commander lowered his salute and turned toward the lieutenant. There was no shouting, no anger, just a steady calm that made the young officer's stomach drop. He told him to report to his office at 0800 with his squadron commander, and added that his flying status was revoked effective immediately. The lieutenant blinked, stunned, realizing these words carried more weight than any raised voice ever could. He tried to speak, but the commander continued, explaining that he wasn't being thrown out. Instead, he was being reassigned. For the next several months, he would lead the base's Heritage and Honor program, interviewing veterans, gathering their stories, and presenting them to every new class of pilots and crews. It wasn't a punishment designed to crush him. It was one meant to change him. The lieutenant swallowed hard, feeling everyone's eyes on him, and then the old man stepped forward. His voice was gentle, almost tired, as he told the young officer that pride meant nothing without respect. He wasn't asking for discipline or revenge. He simply asked him to use his wings to carry the names of the men who came before him farther than they ever could on their own. Weeks later, the lieutenant stood in a quiet base auditorium, speaking to a new group of airmen. On the screen behind him was the same faded emblem from the old man's jacket, now part of a heritage lesson he created himself. In the front row, the old pilot sat with his hands folded, listening as his story reached a younger generation. When the presentation ended, the lieutenant thanked him publicly, admitting his past arrogance. The old man only nodded and asked them to remember those who never came home. Viewers are invited to honor their own veterans by sharing a name or story below.